Hello and welcome to this TFN exclusive. I am Sajo Brito. Today we are joined by a very, very special guest, former Vice President of the Republic of the Gambia, Honorable Fatoumata Jallow Tambajang. Ma, welcome to this exclusive interview.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome, always. Let's get down to business. Gambia made headlines, both locally and international, after a World Health Organization probe revealed that at least 66, now 69 Gambian children died of acute kidney injuries. It was caused by contaminated cough and cold syrups made by an Indian pharmaceutical company. As a mother and as a state woman, how do you react to the news that 69 Gambian children died as a result of this?
It's pathetic. I call it a tragedy, a national tragedy. And as you rightly say, I have a stake in it, as other fellow citizens have a stake in it, because children are our children. They are precious lives. They are vulnerable. Their independence and protection is the responsibility of everyone. So whatever happens to them, everyone should show concern and do what it takes to have government to act in terms of dialogue, in terms of other forms of engagement. So in a nutshell, it's a national tragedy.
The WHO revelations has angered a lot of Gambians, and they have started reacting by, in fact, calling for the immediate sacking or resignation of the health minister, Dr. Amadou Lamin Samate. I mean, as someone who served in government, what is your position on this?
As a former health minister and Women's Affairs, I would think that we need to be, it's really pathetic, and it's everyone is emotional by justification, but my own view would be for us to urge government, call on action for government to take the appropriate measures. The appropriate measures would include policy measures and also would take technical measures. In terms of sacking people, as a fundamental human rights activist, I would rather say it's important that whatever happens, that we take the due process. That is, after reviewing the situation, assessing the situation, inclusively with the citizens of the country, then the measures would be taken. Because rationally, if you sack the minister, then you are removing great fundamental information that the minister may have been privileged to have. And fundamentally also, it could be injustice against the minister. I'm speaking as a former Minister of Health and Women's Affairs, and I'm also speaking as a stateswoman and at the same time as a mother.
Right.
Yes.
And you know, usually in situations like this, especially in the advanced world, sometimes maybe this is why Gambians are calling for this, because in some instances it is people in authority who will actually come out to say that I have resigned because my integrity is at stake. If you were in this position today, what would you have done?
I would have resigned. I would have resigned, or administratively I would have requested for leave of absence until investigation is completed. That's my position.
Yeah.
But people are different. People are different. If you look at, you have to weigh the principles of life and the human rights justice aspect of it. The principle of life, when you're principled, certain things happen, you are accountable. No matter what, who did it within your institution, once as the head of the institution, you are liable, you are accountable. So by way of principle, I would have resigned.
I'm so glad that you mentioned the word accountability, because I think it is very important, especially when it comes to this AKI deaths. It is common knowledge, and it's good that I'm speaking to you because you've served as health minister before. It is common knowledge that medicines do not just enter a country like that. It has to go through a process. I mean, it has to be authorized. It has to be tested before it enters a particular country and before it will be allowed to hit the shelves for sale. I mean, what do you think the Gambia government should do to make sure that there are laws regulating the medicines and pharmaceutical business in this country? Because this issue has raised so many questions about how people in the pharmaceutical business are notorious for giving their licenses to other people to operate in the business, something which is very dangerous.
You know, when circumstances like this happen in a country, it raises a lot of questions. It raises the question of governance, system of governance, where you are talking about transparency and accountability, ensuring that everything goes in line with the policies and programs of the sector. In this instance, it raises the question of the pharmaceuticals company, it raises the question of importation, it also raises the question of relationships, which is fundamental. It raises the question of corruption. How can they have such medication in a country? So it also raises the question of leadership at different levels. Leadership at the level of the ministry, at the level of the hospitals, and at the levels of the health post. And for me, critically analyzing the situation, I think we have more than 69 children who died because it is countrywide. We should look at it. We should not confine the deaths only to Francis Small Hospital.
Right.
This is where at least people have some minimum exposure to understanding what they are giving to their children. How about the people in the rural areas who just walk across the pharmacies, so many bogus pharmacies, to say that Totole Bendimola, Suma Dombe Dafa Sahat. They just give you something over the counter and just write strikes one morning, afternoon and evening. So I think it's important as a former health minister and also a development practitioner with the experience I've had in the UN and government and civil society, I think it's important that they have a very comprehensive assessment of the situation in order to give us the accurate statistics of exactly how many children died from this, and looking also at the systems, what are the systems that are in place. It's an issue of compliance, non-compliance to regulations. It also raises the questions of boards of directors in the health sector, in the pharmaceutical sector, the subsector. So it raises all these type of issues. So the terms of reference that government has given, they have adopted measures, have been following this situation. But the measures should really not brush out the fundamentals of such an investigation. They should look at the policies in terms of non-compliance. They should look at the issue of the system, the processes also in terms of how medicines are imported. They should also look at the issue of corruption. So it should be a comprehensive investigation. And of course it requires a multi-sectoral approach. I am concerned that the Ministry of Gender and Social Protection is not in the forefront of this issue because it's children. Protection, social protection, it falls within their mandate. Health, yes, but the health of the child, holistically you're talking about the well-being of the child. So the women's ministry, gender ministry, should be in the forefront, working in partnership with the health ministry, and also looking at also the interior GRA. They have to be multi-sectoral. They have to adopt a multi-sectoral approach to it.
Right.
Security, yes, the internal, the police, the interior ministry is involved. But this is a sector. Everybody has a mandate, so they have to look at, each one has to look at what is their mandate in it. And even when they were given, the Honorable Minister of Health was making pronouncement on this, the Minister, Honorable Minister of Gender, and other
should have been present.
They should have been present. The nation should have seen them as a team addressing holistically this issue.
Right. Before I get to other things, I want to talk about the Gambia government's approach to addressing this whole issue. When the news came out, the Indian government was very quick to react, to say that we will cooperate with the World Health Organization to make sure that we get to the bottom of this. It took the Gambia government almost 48 hours before they could utter a single word, not even to local media. I think the first person to speak about the issue was the Director of Health Services, Dr. Bitey, and it was on Al Jazeera. Many Gambian journalists tried reaching out to these people, and they wouldn't respond to our calls or our messages. When the President came out to address the issue, it was less than 10 minutes. It was an address to the nation. It was followed with a lot of criticism because Gambians said that the President did not show any sort of sympathy or remorse whatsoever about what happened. Did you watch the President's statement, and what is your reaction?
I was not in the country, and that's not an excuse because now we have information everywhere.
Right.
But I was, later on I read the press release and so forth, and I realized that there were gaps. Government reacted very late. In a situation like this, I always would like to advise, I always advise government to the highest level to react swiftly so that people would know the level of concern of government, and particularly His Excellency the President Adama Barrow as head of the nation. He's not only head of the nation, the father of the nation, but he's a father of children. So it's very, very important, because when things like this, deaths, especially 69 deaths, and I am confidently saying it's more than 69, because knowing that the deaths are only focused, the issue is now, the focus is just made on the
Edward Francis
Small Hospital. How about the health post? How about Basse? How about Bansang? How about Farafenni? How about the other health posts that are in the local districts? They need to have that. So important urgency is emergency. In emergency situations, you don't wait for time. Immediately you get the information, the minister, substantive minister that is concerned, or the minister, is usually convoked by His Excellency the President, and immediately they have a task force that looks at it, and immediately he comes out and say, well, this is the situation in the country, and right now, which is also logical, right now we don't have the details of it, but the mere fact that so many lives, we have lost so many lives, we want to allay the fears of everyone that the government is taking due measures to ensure that the issue is investigated, and the information, the findings of the investigation will be shared with the public. It's also important in a situation like this to declare a national state of mourning. Even if it is 5 children, these are lives, precious lives, and particularly if you look at the condition of the children, they are children. They are supposed to be protected. They don't know anything. Do you know what they were going to become?
Yeah.
No. And not only that, life is precious. And Gambia, 1.8 million people, every life matters. Every life with a child or this matters, especially when it comes to children.
Mm-hmm.
So my humble opinion is that the action was late.
Mm-hmm.
They needed to really work urgently.
Yeah.
And sometimes also we blame the executive, particularly the head of state.
Mm.
But this is a moment when things like this happen. Everybody's hands should be on deck. Advices should be on deck.
Mm.
Positions should be taken, and support the president to make the right decision.
Yeah.
The other one that I found also out of context was during the statement, he appreciated the work of the
ministry. He commended them for the good job, as he called it.
As doing the good job.
Yes.
You're talking about deaths. You are talking about losing lives, losing so many children of your nation.
That wasn't a good time for that
That
kind of
wasn't a
statement.
good time for that. I think what should have happened would have been really to say critically, this is what has happened.
Yeah.
I'm really concerned. I'm putting myself personally as head of the father of the nation to ensure that expeditious investigation is done, and we will come back, we will revert to the public. Because also what is important is people should appreciate, the government should appreciate that there is right to know. Right to know, right to information. Each time the public is put in the dark, there is of course room for suspicion, there is room for crisis, there is room for all sort of chaos.
It's almost like a privilege when people ask for information in the Gambia.
It shouldn't be a privilege, it's a right. It's a fundamental right to information. And if you look at the Right to Information Act, everybody has a right to information. They should be transparent, whatever happens, and particularly they need to also consider the important role that the media fraternity is playing in the Gambia. After 2016, I appreciate and I always commend the media fraternity. With the limited resources they have, they are constantly going out, searching for information. And it's important, as Gambians, if they know the information, they should know the information before the international community knows the information.
Right.
Before WHO is declaring, Gambians should know what is happening. And Gambian journalists, each one of you, those who are in the media, can take steps, work together, collaborate, and see how best you can address the issue.
Right.
Make other people know, and not only Banjul or Greater Banjul, but in local languages. We also have to know that the majority of our people are illiterate. They don't speak English. So speaking English will not make them understand. There should also be immediately a campaign.
Yeah.
The ministry should have undertaken immediately multi-sectoral approach to undertake campaigns up to the rural areas, informing people that this is what has happened, but government is taking such a position.
Right.
That way people will be happy that really there is some consideration to them, because a child who dies here probably may have even come from the rural area.
Right.
And because of our interrelationship, we are so is a social need society. Everybody is concerned.
The Ministry of Health and other relevant stakeholders have since embarked on a drug recall exercise, which I think is great. Also, the Gambian president have also reacted to the WHO findings, and he has authorized the country's Medicines Control Agency through the Ministry of Health to suspend the license of the suspected importer and pharmacy who have been selling made in pharma products in the Gambia. What do you think government should do in holding these people accountable?
just as I said earlier, in as much as there have been gaps in the way the situation is handled by government, we know that we appreciate that they have adopted measures, which is of course looking at the licensing, ensuring that there is accountability, looking at the systems of governance, looking at the system of the board of governance also, and also holding eventually what the Gambian citizens and even the international community is waiting for or is expecting from government is to hold those people accountable. Suspension is is a temporary measure,
Yes.
which is helping to facilitate the investigation.
Right.
But after that, the entire world, particularly Gambians and those mothers who definitely need justice for their children, need to see that there is justice really at the level of ensuring that the people who are held wanting are really given to face the full course of justice. That way is people would definitely start understanding or appreciating the seriousness that is attached to the situation by government.
You know, Gambia's healthcare sector is grappling with a lot of issues, and you never know about them until issues like this come up. Because even when you listen to the director of health services speak to Al Jazeera, one thing he was quizzed about was how these drugs got into the country, who authorized them, and if they were tested. And it seems there was a struggle to respond to these questions. And he kept going on and on about how the country doesn't have good laboratory, quality. What advice would you tell the Gambian president, especially when it comes to investing in healthcare?
If you look at the National Development Plan 2018-2021, in which I was privileged to participate in, the health reforms, the health sector needs radical reforms, robust reforms, from infrastructure to equipment, to health personnel, to decentralization, to resourcing, and to accountability. So much resources. When I was Minister of Health, I couldn't believe the sum of money, the investments in the sector compared to what is done in terms of quality delivery of services, capacity building. People just go training and training rather than really focusing on quality, accountability, primary healthcare delivery. In the 80s, in the 90s, Gambia was a model. WHO took Gambia as a model. When the former director of WHO, the late Dr. Samba, may his soul rest in perfect peace, was the director of WHO. Gambia was a model in the health sector. Now, what they need to do is just to see the reforms that have now been the National Development Plan, what the ministry had given is yet to be implemented. So they need to look at those fundamentals and ensure that the reforms are enforced to the spirit and letter. They need to look at the resourcing, because you cannot what you call the leakage bucket, the leaking bucket. You put investments and yet you don't see any returns. People want to really see the impact, well-being of their children, of the population, because a healthy nation is a healthy nation is a productive nation, and it's a happy nation also. So they need to look at those reforms, the infrastructure in terms of having good infrastructure, decentralized infrastructure. They need to have quality personnel with incentives, because you cannot definitely hire people and leave them in position for 20 years without any incentives. They need to look at them. If they want decentralization, it must be measured with, commensurate with the incentives. They also need to look at the governance structure in terms of the pharmacies or the pharmaceuticals. They need to also look at bringing on board people with relevant background to serve on boards of directors, and they also need to look at the cooperation what the international community is giving to the Gambia as a complement to the resources of this thing. The health sector has sufficient resources. All they need is the management of it, how to manage it, how to ensure that there is accountability, and how to ensure that people outside, in terms of the licensing also is very important. The licensing, I understand, I'm not sure, but it's in the public domain that most people in the health sector have license and they sublet this to other people. That also has to be reviewed and regularized. So these are the things that I would say that they need to look at. They also need to look at the, of course, the sanitation is very important. Today you go to Francis Paul, you don't know, you can't imagine that is a hospital in the capital, especially when you go in the rural areas. Sanitation, you need to have accountability in terms of how people work, professionalism. Nursing is caring for lives. But now you go to the hospital, you open any cupboard, as basic as that, you find roaches. The cleanliness, sanitation, these are all part of accountability. And finally, I think they need to also look at the auditing. Accountability is auditing. What is your inflow? What is your outflow? What is your balance, and how you're using it? You know, we really have to strengthen the system of accounting so that they ensure that every value, the value for dollar or value for dollars, whatever comes in is used to save lives. And I think the focus must be, of course, is saving lives, but when you look at the activities undertaken like the COVID-19, the way so much money was invested in the health sector, but the management of those funds are really under expectation. We would have thought that much money would be given, and communication, investment on communication strategies, communication, the engagement of people, different sectors, and particularly civil society, the media. Everybody has a role to play in it, and I think this is a wake-up call for the Ministry of Health to ensure that they put their house in order. It's not a criticism, but a constructive criticism, and also they need to look at the issue of decentralization. Very important, decentralization with the right professionals profile, with the right financing, and with also the right equipment. So many of the health posts, like even if you go to Farafenni, equipment is lacking. Saving lives, people are still on donkey cart. Maternal and child mortality is really, for the past 5 years, doesn't make any difference. They really need to look at that. And health, the preventive aspect is very important. They must invest in the preventive aspect, because prevention is better than cure. Just as we had success in the 80s and the 90s with the primary health care program.
I know this interview is supposed to be mainly on health-related matters, but I would just like to gauge your opinion about other things that are happening in this country. A few days ago, a Gambian comedian, was arrested and invited for questioning by the Gambia police because they believe that he said something about the first family that he wasn't supposed to say. There is a group of young Gambians who are also planning to organize a press conference about the related AKI deaths, and it seems they were also invited by the police for questioning. Now, a lot of people are saying that this looks like we are going back to the dark days. Some of them are already thinking that, the Gambian leader has some dictatorial tendencies. I mean, how would you describe this thing? You've lived during Jawara's time, you witnessed Jammeh's time, you've served in key government positions during all those periods. Do you think Gambians are taking advantage of the newfound democracy?
When I was in government, my focus was the well-being of every Gambian as the government's focus, because I'm working with government. My responsibility was to ensure that government's policies and programs are delivered within a climate of social cohesion, social protection, security. Because democracy is an open door. There is respect for the individual. And because people protest, which is also a fundamental issue, concern for me and other Gambians, when something happens and people secure permits, what they should be protected, the state must ensure that they are protected. If, for instance, people want to make conferences, press conferences, and they are within the realm of the law, I don't see any need to really call them for questioning. Unless the law is there, the Public Act is there. Even though we are yet to have the public acts that we desire as a democratic state, we need to know that this democracy, and we are working within the context of democracy. And to stabilize the country, we need to we need to protect the citizens. The state needs to protect the citizens by ensuring that, giving them civil liberties. If they have press conferences and within the realm of the law, why would you call them for questioning? You don't call them for questioning. You protect them. And if those who are protecting them find that there are some, in every gathering you might find some indisciplined or so forth.
A different agenda perhaps.
Different agenda, you can address it. But the law, really we need to be compliant. Because what we said in the National Development Plan and what we said as the national agenda, which is of course the agenda of the Coalition 2016, that was the agenda we adopted and we gave it to government, which is what they have been implementing, and is of course in the process of review, whether it has already been reviewed. The rule of law is fundamental, and that is of course the bottom line. That's the nucleus of democracy. People must be seen as being free, because coming from where we come from for 22 years, this is a time not for complacency, but it's a time where people feel that fundamental freedom of expression, of association, and of course of expression. That's my concern, and my advice and recommendation would be the state must ensure that we don't go back to those tendencies. And they also, for instance, when people are, even those who have permit, sometimes you find that the police are sent for sending tear gas and so forth. That's really, it's not a good image for the country. And we must, as much as possible, the state must, as much as possible, as advice, as a senior citizen, and as somebody patriotic who loves Gambia, and of course who is supporting government. Because how are we supporting government? Every time there is a crisis, I'm in the forefront or I'm in the midst. If you love your country, you look at you take your country first. You don't sit. You are never complacent. So these are the things that I think that the state, especially the executive, must really put itself into it, in the forefront, and ensure that it doesn't happen. Sometimes I do understand, as an experienced person, working government on every side, UN, sometimes people below the executive may take certain measures and actions that are not in conformity with the state laws, rules and regulations. but there must be oversight responsibilities where everybody, that the executives are aware of what is happening. Sometimes by the time you know, it's already, just like in any other country, so many times it is the people who are under the executive that take the prerogative of saying, probably either they don't know, or probably they want to be seen as doing acting on certain situations. But the executive should be really aware and should be alert to know what is happening in the country.
Right.
And every time things happen, quickly the head of action, urgent action, seeing him on TV, seeing him on radio, and people translating in different languages to know that this is of concern to them. And other recommendation would be situations like this. National Day of Mourning could be something that can also be contribute to allaying the fears or really making people go back to more understanding.
And finally, before I let you go, I believe that you followed the Gambian President Adama Barrow during his UNGA visit in the United States. When he came back, he in fact extended an olive branch, to his critics, to the opposition, and said they should come together and work for the interests of this country. Few days after that, a very young Gambian politician decided to join hands with Adama Barrow, that is the party leader of Citizens Alliance, Dr. Ismaila Ceesay, and I believe you've been following that news. And he caught a lot of backlash as a result of him joining Barrow to work in the interest of what he describes as the interest of the Gambian people. I mean, what is your reaction to that, to opposition coming to work with Barrow? Because a lot of people are saying that, Barrow is on a mission, to break the opposition and annihilate them. What is your response to that?
My response to that is positive. I have always advocated and I have always advised His Excellency the President. I say peace and reconciliation is everybody's business, but that he should take the leadership. And if he so desires, and I'm sure other people have also advised him, once he has taken that leadership, people should be positive, they should be responsive. The challenge we have as Gambians, we are more of reaction than responsive. Every time when you react. Sometimes you react even for something that is good for you, because you don't know at the end of the day what is there for you, what is there as a country for citizens. So I think it's very positive. I applaud him for that, and I am calling on all opposition parties. You don't necessarily have to leave your party and join make a coalition or an alliance or whatever. I don't think that is his call. His call is everybody should work together, contribute to nation building, because the country belongs to all of us. You have one president, but you have all actors. Everyone is our responsibility. And we need to also, as citizens, understand, appreciate that our context today is peace and reconciliation. And for the next 20 years, we are going to see ourselves in peace and reconciliation because of what we suffered for the past 22 years. People have been, this social fabric has been fragmented. Brothers don't speak to brothers. Cousins don't speak to cousins. Political parties are the same. So they should welcome the call. And I'm also even recommending that he goes beyond that and organize a national reconciliation program, where everybody comes, everybody hugs everybody, everybody forgives everybody, and we work as a nation. We don't necessarily, if these, the Citizen Alliance decides to join him as a coalition, that's their prerogative. It's their prerogative. They have principles, mandate and principles. If it is within the principles and processes of the policies of CA, I don't see anything wrong with that. It's unless if it goes against the mandate, principles and processes of procedures of the association. So I think we should forgive. I'm calling on everybody to forgive. We are all believers. We need to forgive. We need to open our hearts. We need to understand that this country is our country. Today is Barrow. Tomorrow it could be another person. After tomorrow it could be another person. The executive changes, but the country stays.
Yeah.
So, and what we should really look at, our national anthem. What unites us is more than what divides us. What divides us usually political lines, social lines. But what is important is our national anthem. Let's remind ourselves of our national anthem. Remind ourselves of our religions, unity of purpose, social cohesion, democracy. It's going to, without peace and reconciliation, it will be difficult to really, for the nation to move. And we need to move as a nation and not by individual. But of course, perceptions are different. This is my humble opinion and my humble advice, not only to Barrow, but also to the entire nation. It is us. We have a responsibility to make sure that everything works. And that unity of purpose, if something doesn't work, you just engage the executive, have a meeting, have dialogue. And this is important, that we have to, after the Truth and Reconciliation, that we have a program on social dialogue. It could be economic, could be social, on all issues. Once there is an issue, we can have a diverse commission or council where people will bring on issues, national issues, discuss it, and then eventually feed them as policies, procedures. And see, Gambia is too small. And our smiling coast, we must cherish our smiling coast. This is something that we found our forefathers implanted, and we need to really hold on to that so that we can have peace, prosperity, and unison in our country.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ma, for sitting down with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of this exclusive interview with former Vice President of the Gambia, Madam Fatoumata Jallow Tambajang. Thank you very much once again.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Anytime. I hope you...
Hello and welcome to this TFN exclusive. I am Sajo Brito. Today we are joined by a very, very special guest.